Basically, I loved this. Hello and welcome back to part 2 of everything I read in 2022. If you haven't seen the first part of this video where I talk about everything non-fiction that I read and also the other fiction things that I read, you can check that out there. This part of this video is dedicated to all of the romance and fantasy things that I read in 2022. I will also at the end of this video talk through my reading goals for 2023 and all of my reading stats from 2022 if that floats your boat. This video is very easy to divide into parts when it comes to what I read, because it's just a straight split. There were 2 series that I was reading last year. 2022 was a lot of work and I really wanted to switch my brain off, and I did what every normal person would do, and when I wasn't doing work I was scrolling through TikTok. And as you can imagine, after having ended up on BookTok, I ended up with ACOTAR in my hands. So I read a bunch of Sarah J Maas's books from her ACOTAR series and from Lauren Asher's F1 series, Dirty Air. You know what, I know that you guys want the ACOTAR book review, so I'm going to start with the Dirty Air books. Lauren Asher's series Dirty Air is set within the world of F1. I read the first book of it in 2021, which is called Wrecked. 2022 I read the second book, Collided, third book, no, this book is called Wrecked. The first one's called Throttled, my bad. The third book, Wrecked, and I've bought the fourth and final book, Redeemed. Not because I think these books are good, mind you. Not because I think these books are good, because these books help me turn off my brain. The thing is, I like F1. I really do, but what I also am is an adult. I don't want to read fan fiction written by 14-year-olds. I can't do it anymore. It was fine when we were the 14-year-olds, but I can't. The line can't cross anymore. So I bought books instead, thinking it would be better. But the reality is, and I shall be very honest about this, these books suck. These books suck. They're so bad. They're so badly written. A pinnacle of mediocrity. The only reason I read them is because they're set within F1. That is the only fucking reason. That is their only redeemable quality. If there was a better series set in F1, I would probably read that. These books are trope after trope after trope, and they're 400 pages long as well. That's what kind of blows my mind about these, is they're really long, but my god, can you read them fast? You can read them about as fast as the cars in here go. That's the whole reason that I feel like I can commit to them, because I'm not really committing to them. I'm reading it pretty quickly until I get to the smut, and that's the main thing. I'm not joking, if there was no smut in these, I wouldn't fucking read them. This is my guiltiest of guilty pleasures, and that's fine. Collided is, oh my god, do I even remember what happens in this? The protagonist of this is called Liam Zander. Are they fake dating or are they pretending they're not dating? Oh my god, I don't fucking remember anymore. Or are they told they have to date to keep up appearances? Either way, this was a bit more romancy, and that was quite fun. Wow, there was romance in the romance books that you read? That's a shock, Emma. That is a shock. Characters are very 2D, it's just not very interesting, but you do kind of know who they're supposed to be within actual F1, so it's readable. It's fluffy, and the relationship in this, they're both best friends with the protagonists from Throttled. But it's just, yeah, pretty much. And then what I saw quite a few people say was Collided and Throttled aren't great, but Wrecked is better because it goes deeper. No it doesn't. The premise of this, one of the drivers, who's called Jackson, who's definitely not based on Lewis Hamilton, he's dealing more with like how his mother is over a while succumbing to her long-term illness, a genetic illness, and then finding out whether he also does or doesn't have it, and how that leads to his very destructive habits, his use of drugs and alcohol and that kind of stuff. And then a woman is brought in, her name is Eleanor, and she's basically his like wrangler, should we say, and then like how they fall in love and whatever, while she deals with her own stuff. And yeah, the premise of that kind of feels like it's going to deeper territory, more heavy territory, but it doesn't really. It's one of these things that I think people make mistakes on, and I see it all the time, especially you see it in film schools all the time. People think that trauma means drama, and that's just not the case. Like, I've been watching a decent amount of Grey's Anatomy at the moment, and okay, sure, you're in a hospital, there is a lot of like really traumatic and objectively dramatic things that happen, but the thing with storytelling is that you don't always care. Just because something awful is happening doesn't mean that as the audience or the reader you necessarily care. Just saying that somebody is dying or will succumb to an illness or whatever, you have to make people feel it in order to care. You can't expect people to care. And that is an important life lesson as is, but I also think it's important to understand that when you're creating a world, a story and characters, if you create boring characters which okay, maybe Jax and Eleanor are better than in this they're called Sophie and Liam. Like, if you don't pad out characters, if you don't show the good and the bad, which this does more, it shows good and bad a bit more, but if you don't create characters who feel like real people, people are less likely to care. And then yeah, maybe horrible things happen to them or happening to them, but then again, why do I care? The smut in this was A, right at the end, and B, not very much, or very good. So I kept reading this being like, where is math? Where is math nut? It was predictable and it's just boring. I really only read them for the setting. I read this because people said it was better, so I had higher expectations of it. It deals with darker stuff, it's better. It's just not. And now the only reason I'm going to read the last one is because now it's become more of a comfort thing, because they're reoccurring characters, it has a reoccurring setting, I know what's going to happen, it's comfortable, it's familiar. I think that's probably why I read this series in the first place, is it relies so heavily on tropes that you know what you're getting, and then you don't get anxious in any kind of way because you know what's going to happen. Maybe that's the reason that lots of people do read so many of these kind of books, even though you know how it's going to end every time. You know, the whole you've read one, you've read them all. Kind of on the same basis of when people rewatch old TV shows instead of new ones, because it's easier to watch something where you know something's going to happen. It's like maybe a sense of control to that, and maybe that's the reason why BookTok has poisoned our minds with making us read the same trope-ridden, badly written books over and over and over again. The sense of control, but also the romance that we are severely lacking, especially my generation. I saw this thing recently of somebody saying that we're, at my age group, are a generation of like lost romance. I was like, oh, well, yeah. Great. That's apparently why we're reading so many romance books. But then also women have always read romance books, and that kind of neglects the fact that there's an entire history of like women have always read and we've always written for ourselves, and we've always written romance because men are a disappointment. Straight men are well, no, just men are a disappointment. Anyway, the Dirty Air series, it sucks, but I'm gonna read all of them, and you know, Lauren Asher already has my money, so. I know people really like her other series, so just like that billionaire sort of series, but it's too fanfiction-y. It's too fanfiction-y. And this for me is how I justify reading these. It's just printed out fanfiction. That's just what it is. That's literally just what it is. But I've also read fanfiction that is much better than this, so. Anyway, we're gonna move on to the thing that I know you want me to talk about. There is one, who is the book boyfriend that has never disappointed me? I'm so in love with Riesland that also the disagreement on it, is it Riesland, is it Riesland? His name is Reese, so I'm calling him Riesland, but that man is so fine. That man is so fine. I know he's a character in a fucking book series, but the man is so fucking fine. I just have such a soft spot for Cass, but that's really not the point. Anyway, I read ACOTAR because I spent too much time on TikTok, and you know what? I fucking loved it. I really enjoyed it. It's some of the fastest things I've ever read in my entire life. They're also not that difficult to read or anything, but I genuinely, like, these books are like 600, 700 pages long. I initially avoided this series because I was like, there's no fucking way I'll be able to read books that long. I'll be stuck on this series for like a year of my life. Honestly, now I would have loved to be stuck on this series for a year of my life because, oh my god. Basically, I loved this. I loved this. I was so surprised how much I enjoyed this. I really enjoyed this. I'm just really emotionally attached to Reese, but that's not the fucking point. Isn't it the point? It is the fucking point. Of course it's the fucking point. Basically, I'm alone, so instead of having a boyfriend, I have Reese. A fairy king, whatever he is. Oh, Jesus Christ. I just fucking love the bad boys. I read basically all of them. You'll notice that I haven't read the last one. I've got it. The reason I haven't read it and didn't read it last year, because if I read it and I finish it, it means that it's over. And I can't remember if she's meant to be writing, Sarah J. Maas is meant to be writing another one for this series, but if I finish it, it means it's over. And it's just really nice knowing that that book is waiting for me, and knowing sort of like the place that these books took in my life last year. This is a comfort place, this is a comfort zone. I read this when I was producing in Sicily because it meant that I got to read this when I'd done everything that I needed to do. So when I was there, this was the thing that I could do to switch off. Like, all of my work is done, everything is taken care of. This was like my official downtime. And when we were there and people saw me reading, they left me alone. Not always. As a producer, you can never expect to be left bloody alone, even when you guys are wrapped for the day. But this was my kind of thing of being like, go away or I will throw it at you. Don't ask me if I threw this at anyone. You don't want to know. A Court of Thorns and Roses is a romantic fantasy series by Sarah J. Maas. So as far as I understand, she wrote this one first, and then she wrote these ones much later and wrote a bunch of books in the middle, because what I'd heard a lot was that this one is fine. You just have to stick with it because the next ones are much, much better, which is what I did. This one is not great. It's not incredibly written. It really was for the fact that people said that the next ones were so good that I was like, fine, I will stick with it. And really, when I talk about, you know, how people write and the fact that you have to learn, first of all, you just genuinely just have to fucking learn. Finding as a writer what your style is, you know, all of that kind of stuff, and just getting, it's a skill like anything else. You can learn, you can improve. There is a marked difference between the quality of the writing in this book and this book. It's just nice to know people do get better. I don't know if that just sounds stupid, but there is genuinely a remarkable difference between the quality of the writing in these. Not even just in the storytelling, whatever, just dead ass the words, the prose. There are bits in this that felt so like cringe to me, especially like earlier on in the book, where she's talking about things like, oh, like the mansion or whatever, and I'm just like, I'm gonna shoot myself, it's so stupid, why am I reading this? But I also knew there was smut in this, so I just kept reading it. You would be surprised what you can make me read if I know there was gonna be smut in it. First of all, this obviously got brownie points because it was a fucking map. You put a fucking map in any book, I'm gonna lose my shit and be like, this is excellent and everything I've wanted to read ever, it's because there's a map in it. And the other thing, if you look at a book that I've read, you'll notice about how I feel about it, is you will not be able to see this, but there is very, 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 very few times where I've written in it and annotated. That is a huge, huge marker for me as a person to be like, how did you find that book? Same with these ones. There is really not much in here. You might see this and be like, that's loads, but you should see what I'm doing to my copy of The Name of the Rose. That, I do, the margins, they're like full, so you can tell if I like a book based on how much it gets vandalised, or annotated depending on your point of view. This one I knew was one that you have to get through to get to the really, really good stuff. Kind of like the first 40 pages of War and Peace being like, you know, making it for the worthy if you get through that bit. And that's kind of how I feel about this. And I'm really talking about these ones assuming you guys have read them, because I'm going to do horribly recapping any of these. Feyre, I keep calling her Freya in my head because it looks like that and I'm dyslexic, but Feyre kills a wolf who is actually a fairy, and they think she's going to break some curse. And then she gets dragged across the wall, a classic high fantasy trope, and is made to live with a man wearing a mask. It's meant to be based on Beauty and the Beast, I think. It's, as far as I understand, maybe the initial idea behind the world, and then, because they're all very different, maybe, I don't know, what, did she scrap it? Who knows? It's easier if I talk about these all as a whole, isn't it? This one, you have to get through it. This one, A Court of Mist and Fury, it's so good. It's really good. This was, in my opinion, this is the best one. This is certainly my favourite one. This is so good. Basically, Tamlin and Riesland like fighting over Feyre. So good. Wings and Ruin is more like their big like war epic part of this series. And then A Court of Frost and Starlight. I will just talk about this one and then I'll go back to the other two because that makes more sense in my brain. Some people call this the fourth one, some people call this 3.5. I would also call it 3.5. This is essentially set in the Night Court city that I've forgotten the name of because they're all made up and I'm too dyslexic for this shit. It's set there after the events of the first 3 books. It's just fluff. It's fluff, but it's nice and it's lovely. And did I draw the house? I did draw I drew the house, so it was a lot of fun. This was just a very comfort book, and I enjoyed it immensely. It doesn't have any real bearing on like the wider plot of this world and this huge arc, but it was just nice to read, and it's Christmassy, so I don't think that you really need to read this, but realistically as well, if you've read this, you can knock this one off real quick before you go to A Court of, what is it, Silver Flames? It's not on this bookshelf anymore actually. This was nice, you know, Feyre's first winter solstice as High Lady. It's nice, it was cute, it's cute. That's about it. But these ones I just really enjoyed. This, I was reading it while I was on my shoot as well, and this I finished reading after I came back from my grad film shoot, and I did something that I have never done in my entire life. The last 200 pages I read in a day. I have never ever done that. To read 200 pages in a day. It's just not something I ever do. Like I said, I'm dyslexic, so that alone makes these books special to me. But the fact that, you know, Sarah J Maas uses tropes, she does, of course she uses tropes, a lot of people do, there's nothing necessarily wrong with that. But the way in which that she uses them makes them so much more entertaining. Like, I love a good world build, and I think that's so important when you're doing something like fantasy, and it's pure escapism, you know, all these beautiful courts, all of these beautiful people, all these beautiful high fae, learning all about like the magic and the rules, but essentially you're learning the rules of this game, and from within that you get to really help pad out what this world looks like, and you really do in a way get to decide that while being guided by, you know, the author and what they see the world as, but then, you know, you're always going to see it slightly differently. And I like the consensus though on how we all think Reese looks, and I just, the man is so beautiful, I'm obsessed with him. But this man also just is a cat. Like I love the theories on that, he just is a cat. And you know, we just love a good training montage, we just love a good haters to lovers. I think that's... And then there's obviously an inn, and there's only one bed. I know it's silly. I know in my heart of hearts that it's so silly when you get to an inn and there's one bed, but it's just... And obviously they have a nightmare, because of course they do, but I just... And I think also it being set within this more like, yeah, kind of more medieval world, I guess, just, you know, the whole courtly love kind of thing comes back into play, and the whole like, you know, it's like these interesting explorations of like femininity and masculinity of these women who are very like, I can fight, I can, you know, cut your throat open, I can very much fight for myself, I can very much defend myself, I will very much die for the people that I love, but then having a guy do that for you even though he knows that you don't need him, but he's going to do it for you anyway, it's the whole thing of we become very independent women, but then when you're being really stubborn and tell him to fuck off, and because you know you can do it, and you both know you can do it, but he's going to do it for you anyway and you're going to enjoy it, It's not the point of this video. These books are really fun, they're really escapist, enjoy the comfort that a world that is so... just have fun to have designed. I haven't read anything like this in such a long time, and it's not necessarily groundbreaking or original, because it's not, but it has what I can only describe as one of the best enemies to lovers arc I have read in a really long time, and to be honest, ever. Better than the fan fiction I have read. And that is saying something, because age 14 to whatever, I read so much goddamn fan fiction. Really enjoyed it. And again, you know, haters to lovers, it's this whole thing that somebody sees the worst parts of who you are and then still chooses to like you anyway, or somebody that you think hates you is the person who then comes through, and the fact that maybe you were wrong about people the entire time. And I don't know, the whole like haters to lover thing, it's like they just love you more than if it was friends to lovers or just we're always lovers, do you know what I mean? It's like they already agreed to love all of you because they know how awful you can be too. That's why they hate you in the first place. So it's kind of like the love, yeah, conquers all, triumphs over more, and I just... Freeze. He's so pretty. I know it's a book character, but he's so pretty. And of course it's floating my boat, like one of my reoccurring dreams, not like exact recurring dreams, more like thematic recurring dreams, is exploring palaces. And I've had so many of these dreams, and they're so cool every single time I get them. Recurring dreams where I'm exploring different 18th century sort of big palaces, and you're going through these galleries and over these like, cause it's, you know, it's a fucking dream. The amount of times I've walked over these impossible staircases or these galleries where very, you know, in a Harry Potter way, the figures are moving and speaking to you in these beautiful lavish rooms and this sort of magical aura that so many of these buildings and then the people in these buildings get, and like, it is so fun having those as recurring dreams, and probably one of my favourite things about my subconscious. But this is kind of how that feels when you're exploring the different palaces, the different courts, and like, you know, sort of the themes. And you can, the theming of like the courts and stuff gives them a very strong aesthetic and visual pull, and it's very easy to sort of understand what each of them would look like. It's also, I have to say, do you remember reading these fairy books when you were little? This kind of feels like that. do you know what I mean? This feels like a graduation from that dividing up of magic thematically. So yeah, I don't know. I just feel like the ACOTAR books are absolutely a graduation from the like fairy books we read when we were like 6 and 7. Also because I volunteer and I read with little kids, and this is one of the things they like reading. So whenever I read them, I'm like, oh my god, it's Ruby the Fairy. It's a very nostalgic blast from the past, and I'm right about this. I am very, very right about this. I'm not entirely sure how I feel about Feyre, if I'm completely honest with you. I'm a little bit ambivalent to her. I think Nesta is so much more of an interesting character, and I also think Rhys obviously is so much more of an interesting character, but again, it's because these people are flawed. People make mistakes when they're trying to get you to like their protagonist. It makes them a little bit boring. I kind of feel like that's what Feyre is. Little bit boring. Nesta is much more interesting. But the thing I really did like about this series is the world building. The magic of it. This sounds so silly, but yeah, just the escapism of it. The pretty things and pretty people in pretty places, and then the noble and glory and whatever when you mix in war and fighting for a just and noble cause, and then also mythical, magical backstory. We love ancient stuff. Where does Amryn come from? Nobody knows. Technology in the modern world have taken so much magic and mystery away from us. Understandably so, because as humans we yearn for this truth, whatever it looks like and whatever it really is. But sometimes you just need to read silly little books about silly little fairies in their silly little cabins having silly little smutty painty sex. Chapter 57. Am I right, ladies? But 3 and 3 series for the girlies, and it's called Valeria. What's it called again? Or is that Game of Thrones? I can't remember, but I really pictured it as Edinburgh. Like I really pictured it as like a crossover between Edinburgh and Prague. That's kind of how I saw it, and it just felt very cozy being there. A lot of this book feels very cozy. Again, with the whole her use of tropes, I don't think that they're used in a bad way. I think they're used in a way that we're familiar with it, and then she does something more with them. That's my criticism again with Dirty Air. She took tropes and she didn't do anything with them. She just had the trope and that was that. It was like mapped on perfectly. With Sarah J Maas, I think she's just done it a little bit more interestingly. Not necessarily much more interestingly, but the point is that you care about the characters, you get invested in them, and then you can literally get away with as many fucking tropes as you like, because I care about the characters, I believe the characters, I believe in them, I believe they're real. They need to feel real, and you know, once they do, then yeah, no wonder this becomes a comfort thing to us. And yeah, Tamlin can go do what? He's such a dick, and I hate him so fucking much. He was such a prick. I had such a fun time imagining the like Spring Court like manor and whatever, but I just, oh my god, I fucking hate Tamlin. It's such a good arc for him though, because I was so in love with him initially and hated Rhys, even though obviously I know the tropes, so I know that she was going to fall in love with him, obviously, but to do that arc, especially for Tamlin, to sort of have us so in love with him and then us realise that like this is kind of toxic though, and then sort of double back on it, realise what he was doing to her. Also like by at least the point that I've read up to, it's less that I hate Tamlin, I just think he's really pathetic. So to do that arc for a character that we were all so initially in love with, I think is very well done. So yeah, I did thoroughly enjoy this series. I guess Book Talk was right about something for a change, but more than anything, it was right about the fact that I definitely need to date somebody, because I can't just reread these. Could I reread these? See, this is the thing, is this is something I would reread. I would maybe reread this one a couple times, but yeah, when do I ever want to reread things? I know that people say there are better fantasy series out there and stuff, but I think I can only do with one. I don't really want to read that much more fantasy, mainly because I do think it's you read one, you read them all. They do use a lot of tropes, so I like this one. And do we all like the enemies to lovers thing because we're all worried about the fact that we are difficult to love? Anyway, these are the romance and fantasy books that I read this year, and I enjoyed them a lot. They are my guiltiest of pleasures, especially as a woman who is known for her love of the classics and the greats and the intellectual things and the intellectual pursuits and the why did I buy more of these? I know I bought more of those. Anyways, like I said at the end of the last video and at the beginning of this video, here are the stats for from everything that I read in 2022. I read 12 books out of my goal of 25, and I was very much initially kind of being mean to myself about it. I was like, you know, you read so much in 2021 and now you've dropped the ball and you only read 12 things. Actually, let me get the data. So, as you can see, 2022 I read 12 books. 2021 I read 23. My goal was 25 and I really wanted to make it. I was so close the year before that I was so adamant I'd be able to do it this year, which is part of my disappointment. So it really bothered me that I only read 12. Then it occurred to me to look how many pages I had actually read. And then you look at it. In 2021, still, I read 5,776 pages. Good for me. But in 2022, I still read 4,938 pages. That is a lot. Like, it's much more than I read in 2020, and in 2020 I read 21 books. So the fact that I actually read more in 2022 than I did in 2020, despite the fact that I read less books, like, I just need to give myself credit for it, because what I kept doing was, I kept picking up long ass books. This is what, like 700 pages long? Like, that's 600, Mist and Fury is 600, Crime and Punishment is 550. I need to give myself more credit for the fact that I read longer things. Then look at that. 4,936 pages. Not too bloody shabby. I did good. And then that leads me to how my reading goals for 2023, for this year, have actually changed though. Like I said, last year was a lot of work, so I wanted to turn my brain off, which means that this year I want to read more classics again. This year so far I've read Madame de Lafayette's The Princesse de Claire. Really good, I really enjoyed it. So yeah, I finished Crime and Punishment, read Madame de Lafayette, and now I'm currently reading Umberto Eco's Name of the Rose. Like, these are classics, these are really good classics, and I'm really enjoying them. And also realising, you know, I do have this fear of like reading longer things. I'm dyslexic, I worry about getting stuck in a book forever, but the fact that I, you know, read 2/3 of Crime and Punishment, then put it down for 9 months, and then picked it up and finished it, that was an achievement. I'm very proud. I'm very proud of myself for that. So this year what I want to do is, if I'm reading fiction, I would like to read more classics, and of a non-fiction, I guess things that'll feed back into my self-development, shall we say. I think this will be a good year, and I'm looking forward to that. That is everything that I read in 2022. If you would like to stay up to date with what I'm reading in 2023, you can find me on Goodreads. I'm just Emma Angeline on everything, or at Sarcastic Fish. You can always find me those two places. But yeah, that's this video. Let me know the best thing that you read in 2022 and what you're looking forward to reading the most in 2023. Like, subscribe and all that jazz, and I'll see you guys hopefully very soon. Goodbye.